audience out of the intensity of what was unfolding in Mariupol. So it's better to keep the story within the city, inside this time frame, and therefore we needed another tool to connect everything together. And me doing the voiceover was one of the solutions. And by that time, journalism and fake news, misinformation, disinterpretation became a theme, one of the important themes of the film. So the journalistic perspective was a good perspective to show that. And still, I am part of the community where we are talking about, we are telling the story of, and that's why it was another reason why it's okay. From my own speaking about my own experience, I can also speak about the experience of the community we are talking about. But we were very specific that it's never about us. Yes, it's journalistic perspective. Yes, it's a personal story, but it's not my story. We're not a story of a team. It's still a story of a city, and the whole focus should be on them.
Any questions at the back?
So, two questions or two parts to it. So how do you know when to leave? And once you have, do you have or are you compelled to go back?
So we left on 15th of March, and next day a drama theater was bombed in the city center. And we worried that the drama theater was used as a shelter for at least 1,000 people. And we've been there several times. I knew the people who were there. Some of the women who survived maternity hospital strike went to stay in drama theater and were killed there. And we found out about that, and it was horrible. And no one was there. There were no journalists. There were very little information that was coming out of the city, and only few survivors made it through the Green Corridor at that point. So we were just devastated. And I remember we were talking to each other. We should have stayed at least one day longer. At least one day longer. And then, one day becomes one more day and one more day. I think we made ourselves a promise to work as long as we have at least some resources. And by the time we had to leave, we just didn't have anything left. There was no car. We couldn't move around the city. I was completely out of memory cards and hard drives. Evgeny's computer and camera was, half broken. My mic was broken. So it's just there was no means to continue the work. And there was an option whether we stay and just end up in Azovstal. That was an option, or we try to leave. So, but yeah, I do regret sometimes that we didn't stay one day longer and one day longer. And then I start thinking about Montas Kilarevich, who's a Lithuanian filmmaker who did stay longer, and he was captured on the Russian checkpoint and executed. He was leaving the same way we did, and he was not that lucky as we were.
One more quick question we have time for.
How did Frontline and PBS get involved with API or AP?
Well, I'll just tell you quickly that we started to see a lot of the footage coming out of Mariupol, and I told MSTYSLAV this, but we could just see there was a different sensibility to what we were seeing. And then, of course, we saw the maternity ward footage that was coming out, and we had a partnership with them already, and they also reached out to us the moment MSTYSLAV came out, and I think we talked to you within the first 24 hours. And what was most remarkable was that when I was Zooming with MSTYSLAV, it became really clear to me that, he's a journalist, but he had a vision for a documentary that he was forming in his mind. And so I just didn't know what he was going to be like or who he was. was, and I think that first meeting, and then Michelle met him a day later, I think, or the next day, we started just to talk to him about his vision as a director for the film. And we started to look at all of the footage soon after, as soon as we could get it. It was just really clear that there was a film here. We actually didn't know it was a feature until we got into the footage, and on seeing that what we were starting to see in the news was going to be a documentary. So it was amazing.
I brought out 30 hours of footage, and at that moment was about 40 minutes that were published. So I obviously had a lot of, 30 hours is not that much, but still there was so much important moments that never made it to news or to screen. And I did it already for a long time. I've been through 6 different wars and different tragedies, all equally important. Although Ukraine is much more emotional for me, of course. But I know the problem of even the most important, the most significant moments in our modern history are just getting washed away by the sea of information that is just around us and constantly changing. And the only way to that's what I felt when we left. The only way to somehow preserve the story and not to let it just fade away was to find a way to make a film. Because we don't really, when we look back at our history, we don't really look at newspapers or news dispatches on the TV. We form our understanding of our history through films and through books, and documentaries playing a key part in this, in making sure that the history is preserved, especially, the last thing I want to say, especially when there is active effort by a country with a lot of resources, like Russia, for example, to replace history with their own narratives. They did, as they occupied the city, almost within a month, they sent film crews there, and they started filming a narrative film, scripted, and they recently released it, their own scripted version of reality that they shot in Mariupol. And it's called 2022 Mariupol. So the city kind of they're trying to replace the narratives, the truth with their own version. And with such a huge amount of resources that they have, they succeed sometimes. Unfortunately, that's the truth.
Which means we should all thank you for